Better Preach, episode 59, How to Have Something to Say. Welcome to Better Preach, a podcast for Catholic leaders on developing and delivering great Catholic talks. I'm your host, Ryan O'Hara, a 25-year vet of college and young adult ministry. Thanks for inviting me into your journey of communicating the true, the good, and the beautiful. Okay, hear me out. I think this is a really important episode that you might be tempted to skip, not gonna lie. Like, I don't know, Ryan, you mailing it in here or what? Like, what is this topic? How to have something to say? Yeah, trust me. I think it's gonna be good. Or then again, listen to it, you be the judge, and let me know. As I do with many of these solo or hosted conversations, I put together a simple one-page PDF that you can download in the show notes. There's a link there. And user's choice. You can download it ahead of time and then listen to the episode, or you can listen to the episode and then download it. It's up to you. Or mix and match. Listen to a little bit, download, listen some more. All right. Sorry about that. If this podcast has been helpful to you, seriously, I would love to hear about it. Like, you guys are listening, but you're not letting me know. I see the download numbers. I see you guys downloading it. But I don't hear from very many of you. I want to hear. I want to know the good. I want to know the not so good. I don't want to hear the bad. That'll sort of cancel my day. I'm open to hearing the bad too. Anyway, I'm really open to hearing whatever you'd like to share. You can share that in Apple Podcast or Spotify, or reach out to me best. I think this is the best thing at ryanohara.org/betterpreach. There's a contact form. I would love to hear, like, who should I interview? What should I talk about? I'm going to ask you this, and I want to hear from you. Who should I interview, and what should we talk about in these solo or hosted conversations? Okay, enough of that. Love to also connect on Instagram at Better Preach, all one word. Love to connect with you there. Let's get into it. About 10 years ago, I signed up for a webinar where all of the best Christian speakers, like Protestant pastors mostly, were going to share kind of their secrets as to giving, great talks, great sermons, that sort of thing. And, for a guy that runs a podcast like this, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, whenever, that's like catnip. For me, I could not miss that opportunity. And actually, the main reason is that Louis Giglio, my sort of favorite communicator, the one I've received so much from about communicating and preaching and just being effective in giving talks, he's always been kind of the gold standard for me. And of course, he was a part of the lineup. I wasn't going to miss it. It was literally like 6 hours long. And there were like 30 different preachers, one after the other, sharing, 5 to 10 minutes worth of advice. And I waited and I waited and I waited. And sure enough, Louis Giglio was the last one. And I was like, okay, this better be good. I've waited all day long. I know it's going to be good because this guy always delivers. So he starts talking, and the first and really main thing he said was, make sure that you have something to say. And to be honest, TBH, as my 17-year-old says, that was kind of underwhelming. I was looking for a little bit more than that. A little bit more like inside baseball, like, give me the scoop. Tell me something I don't know. Like, bring me into your world of writing talks. Now, I'm being a little bit over the top right now, but I was sort of genuinely like, I think I just wasted 6 hours of my life waiting to hear that. And I've sat on that word for a long time and wrestled with it. And it's like a fine wine. The longer I've sat with that, idea, make sure that you have something to say, the stronger and weightier that idea has been in my mind and in my heart and in my approach to giving talks. I think it ended up having the fruit that it was intended, but it just took some time. And so I've sat with that message, that all Christian communicators, the first thing he wanted to say was, make sure you have something to say. And so that's what I want to share a little bit about today. And maybe 3 ways that we could make sure with our words, we have something to say. And so I want to try to get practical and kind of parse that out a little bit. And I've got 3 ways that I think we can do it. I want to propose that to you. A deep conviction of mine is that communication is not what you say, but rather what other people hear. Simon Sinek says it this way: communication is not about saying what we think. Communication is about ensuring others hear what we mean. I like how he says it, because this really puts the onus on the listener and understanding the audience, that it isn't just that the right words come out of my mouth, but that the right ideas land in people's hearts and minds and enables them to act on it in some way. And in preaching and in teaching to Catholic audiences, that's really what we're after. Not just to inform, yes, but also to lead to transformation in people's lives. And so it's really crucial that the other people who are listening to you, catch what you want them to receive. And I think that's a lot of what Louis Giglio meant when he said, make sure that you have something to say. Because without it, no one is going to hear what you mean. But I want to start with a couple of assumptions. As someone speaking to Catholic audiences, part of having something to say is to preach and teach the Catholic faith, no more and no less. That's assumption number 1. Assumption number 2 of having something to say to Catholic audiences is to root everything we say in the Scriptures. But why are these assumptions and not part of my point? Well, because you've heard plenty of homilies or other Catholic talks that are rooted in the Church's teaching and Scripture, and nothing was said, right? You've had that experience painfully. So you can't have something to say as a Catholic about Catholicism, at least, if it isn't rooted in Scripture and the Catechism. And rather than that being the ceiling of having something to say, I think of it like the floor. It's just the foundation upon which we have to stand. And as a Catholic and as a Catholic speaker, if that isn't true, if that's not where you're starting, if that's not your foundation, we need to go back to basics. I'm not sure which episode on the podcast that would be. Maybe we need one. Anyhow, those are 2 assumptions that I think are critical. So everything I'm going to say is in light of that foundation, in light of that floor that we are standing on, Scripture and tradition, the Bible and the Catechism. We need one in both hands. Okay, so there are 3 things that I think our words need to be, are the words that we say, if we're intending to get the meaning across that we intend. If we want to get the meaning across to our audience, I think there are 3 things that our words need to be. Now, notice I'm saying our words. I'm not talking about body language. I'm not talking about how you deliver the words that you're sharing. I'm talking specifically about the words that you use and the things that you decide to say when you speak. And so there are 3 things that I hope that your words would be in any talk to make sure that you have something to say. The first one is to be distinct. Be distinct. And I think, how do we do this? How do we make sure that our words are distinct? In Catholicism, we use a lot of words that only we use. And not just in Catholicism, but in Christianity more generally. And those words that we use that are really our words, we say them over and over and over again, and they can start to lose their meaning. We know what they mean, and we also assume that our audience, whoever they may be, also know what they mean, but that isn't true. And the way that I would go about making sure that our words are distinct, how to do this, is to rephrase the jargon. Let me give you some examples. God is calling us. Be holy. Be a disciple. We need to evangelize. All of those things are true. All of those things really match a lot of the common language that we hear in Catholic talks, but they start to glaze over, either because people have heard us say those things too many times, or our audience doesn't really know what they mean. Okay, so let's take God is calling us, for instance. I think another way to say that is that God speaks and he asks us, or he invites us, or he wants us. Just changing our vocabulary to be clearer and to say exactly what it is that we mean by God is calling us can help us. Let's take be holy, for instance. I think it would be better to say be different. Live differently. Choose a different way. You get it. Holy means set apart or different or distinct. And so using a phrase like be different, now maybe you use the phrase be holy, but also use the phrase be different. Or you could just set aside the word holy for a minute and just use that word different. That will get people's attention. They'll perk up. Same thing with God speaks to us and he asks us or he invites us or he wants us, whatever. It's going to help people hear it differently. It's different than what they expect. Be a disciple is another. Disciple is a great, jargon word. Why don't we say something like follow Jesus, imitate how he lives, thinks, and relates to the Father? That's what a disciple is. Somebody who is following after or walking after Jesus, close to his footsteps, and they're imitating, they're learning how he lives and how he thinks and how he relates to the Father or how he relates to whoever. I think that's a better way to express the idea of being a disciple, for instance. Lastly, we need to evangelize. Why don't we say we need to talk with people about who Jesus is and what he has uniquely done for them? We need to explain, we need to actually reinterpret, in some ways define these terms that have become just like wallpaper in our homes. We're so used to it, we barely see it anymore. Now, don't get me wrong here. I'm not suggesting never use these words. I'm just wanting to make sure that you don't only use those words and that you bring in synonyms, bring in other ways of expressing these core ideas that will help others grab on to what you're really trying to say. And so I think sometimes we can be sloppy, and I want to encourage us to do a little more digging and be more specific and even articulate around the things that we're trying to communicate. So again, not suggesting lose these words. These are awesome words, but they have a meaning, they have a context. Let's make sure that we help use them in ways that people can really grab onto them. So that's the first thing that I hope, in order to have something to say, that our words would be distinct. And I think a key way to do that is to rephrase the jargon. And for me, the way that I do this, I probably every talk, Bible, catechism, I'll give you a third book, is a thesaurus. I love this. I can't say it. I love the thesaurus. I don't actually have one. I just Google it. Synonym for X, synonym for Y. And I just choose different words to use. It really, really helps. So I would encourage you to have your thesaurus nearby when you're writing talks, so you can find new words to say things in a more distinct way. Okay, Let your words be distinct. That's number one. Number two, be bold. Let your words be bold. And here's how I would suggest we do this. Use absolutes sparingly, yet strategically. What do I mean by absolutes? In every circumstance, always, never, will not. Now, we cannot do this multiple times in a talk. We might get one absolute in. And so that's why I say you have to use them sparingly, yet strategically. And I think this really helps us to be bold. And the truth is, I want to be as bold as I possibly can, but not 1 inch more. And I think the saints and their words and their quotes can be really helpful here. And I would say to build on their bold statements, not going further than them, but explaining what their words mean to a modern audience. I'll give you an example, though, just from a talk that we might give. I'm not using a saint here, but making sure that we phrase things as bold as we can, but not 1 inch more. I'm going to give you 3 phrases, and you can kind of see where we're going with this. Prayer is an important part of our spiritual lives. That's phrase number 1. Phrase number 2, if you don't pray every day, you will go to hell. Okay. Phrase number 3, you will not become who God created you to be without a consistent prayer life. You see, in the first example, prayer is an important part of our spiritual lives. That's true. It's not bold. And in the second one, if you don't pray every day, you will go to hell. That's bold, but I'm not sure that's true. And in the third instance, it's like Goldilocks and the 3 bears. Too soft, too hard, just right. The third phrase, using an absolute like will not, you will not become who God created you to be without a consistent prayer life. I think that's bold and true. And so this is the line that we have to come as close as we can without crossing it. And I think too often I don't think we do the too bold stuff too often. No one wants to get into heresy, right? But it's a lot easier just to stay a bit too soft. You know, prayer is an important part of our spiritual lives. We'll say that all the time and not realize that we're leaving some meat on the bone, some food on the table, if you will. But my encouragement to make sure that we have something to say, our words need to be bold. And absolutes or superlatives can help us as long as they're used strategically and sparingly. And again, I recommend the lives of the saints, the witness of their lives, but specifically things they've said. You know, the church has combed through everything that saints have written and is on record as quoted to them, and in some way has put a stamp of approval on their words. And so while sometimes their words will need, some kind of modernizing, let's say, it's more just putting their words out there and then helping people understand what they meant and what was intended by it. So allow them to be bold if that's an area that you may struggle with as well. All right. Let your words be distinct. Let your words be bold. And finally, let your words be clear and direct. And I think the way that we do this, how we would do this, is to say what you mean and mean what you say. Oftentimes, in order to be clear and direct in talks, I try to think about how would I explain what I'm about to say to a 10-year-old, to an 11-year-old, to a 12-year-old, basically to a middle schooler. They have the attention spans of a gnat, but they're intelligent enough to be able to understand what you're saying. They may not have a deeper theological formation, but they're able to understand things quite well. How would you explain it to a middle schooler? I think it helps to be clear and direct and to say what you mean and mean what you say. But of course, in order to say what you mean, you've got to figure out what you mean. In order to have something to say, in order to be clear and direct and to say what you mean and mean what you say, you have to back up a few steps and make sure you know what is meant for this talk. What is the big idea? What is the thing that you are trying to accomplish? What's the goal? And let's let it be one thing, right? You've got a shot here to say one thing, maybe two things, possibly three. What is that one thing that you're trying to get across? Can you say it in one sentence? If you struggle to say it in one sentence, I think it'll be very difficult for you to get that idea across to your audience. One of the things I enjoy doing is if I'm giving a talk that day or, like that night or the next day, and people ask me what I'm doing tonight, I tell them I'm giving a talk. And I do that intentionally because they'll always ask, well, what's the talk about? And so it's kind of a test. Am I able to articulate in one sentence, in two sentences, succinctly and clearly what it is I'm talking about? It's like a fun test to figure out, do I know what I'm about to say? And so the clearer I can be in that moment, it tells me that I'm close to the bullseye of knowing exactly what I mean to say, and I have the words to say what I mean. And so again, I think this can help us to be clear and direct, but we have to back up a couple of steps. So your audience, I think, in this instance, if your words are clear and direct, your audience will be moved to action because of your clarity and your conviction, not like your impressive vocabulary, not all the big words and the big ideas and the number of them that you're sharing, that you've kept things simple. And I really found this to be helpful. Say what you mean what you say. How would you explain it to a middle schooler? How would you explain it to your work buddy, down the hall who's asking, what's the talk about? We need to be able to summarize quickly and succinctly and clearly what it is we're aiming at. So in order for us to have something to say, now I realize this is super meta. Like, do I have something to say about having something to say? I don't know. You guys will have to tell me, reach out to me and let me know. I hope so. I'm taking a risk here, putting my neck on the line a bit. But I do want to leave you with one last tip. And I've seen this work over and over again. I've seen the opposite work against me, and I'm sure you have too. The final tip of making sure you have something to say is to let our words be brief. Less is always more. The longer your talk is, the more opportunities for you to lose your audience by losing your way. I think our audience can follow us if we know exactly where we are going. Even in difficult turns and tough terrain, if we're confident about where we're going and we can lead the way, most audiences will follow us. But the more words we're throwing out there, the harder it is for us to make sure that we've kept our way. And so being brief, I think, allows us to do these other things more easily, to be distinct, to be bold, and to be clear and direct. Each of those things will be easier the briefer that we are. And again, we speakers have a greater appetite for words and ideas than other people listening to us are ready to and able to receive. And so less is more. That's my final tip. So grateful to be with you, to talk with you about these things. As you know, we alternate between interview episodes and solo episodes with me or my trusty occasional co-host, Connor Flanagan. Look for those to come back again in a couple of weeks. I'm excited about what's coming with new interviews. If you find this podcast helpful, I would love to hear about it. I would love to know what you think about the show. Please share a rating and a written review, Apple Podcast or Spotify. Also reach out on my website at ryanohara.org/betterpreach. There is a contact form there. And I know you all have millions of choices when you podcast. Thanks for press and play today. See you next time.